9 months ago, I watched a star wink out in real time. Not explode, just stop. The observatory crowd dismissed it as an instrumentation hiccup, but my gut insisted otherwise, a dull pressure behind the sternum that never quite left. A week later, a second star vanished, this one 63 light-years closer. By month's end, the catalog of missing luminaries became a bleeding wound across every telescope feed. An impossible pattern, like cosmic lights switching off according to some vast, unseen schematic. I spent those nights hunched over spectral graphs, each new blackout eroding another layer of certainty. Colleagues whispered about dust clouds, errant black holes, even divine retribution. I heard desperation in every theory. When the International Stellar Alert Board convened an emergency summit, we finally pooled data without the usual rivalries or egos. The conclusion chilled the air. At the present rate of disappearances, the observable universe would be dark within 9 months. No supernova residues, no gravitational lensing, no gamma spikes, just blank coordinates where suns had been. We weren't watching stars die, we were witnessing them erased. Someone, something, was turning them off. 5 days later, a chain of encrypted transmissions, origin unknown, landed in my private relay. They contained a single phrase repeated in dozens of dead languages: instance termination scheduled. That was the moment I realized the truth might not be astrophysical at all. The phrase looped in my head like a corrupted mantra as I boarded the red-eye to Geneva for the summit's second session. Instance termination scheduled. Not star termination, instance. The choice of word felt surgically precise, the kind a software engineer might whisper while archiving deprecated code. I tried to dismiss the notion during the flight, burying myself in raw photometry, but every dataset only deepened the pit in my stomach. On arrival, the tone in the conference hall had curdled from alarm to grim pragmatism. Military liaisons replaced half the astronomers, and rows of portable Faraday cages sprouted like metal blooms around classified workstations. Behind closed doors, I briefed a joint panel on the mysterious transmissions. Their first question wasn't who sent it, but how much time do we have? 8 months, 26 days, give or take, before the darkness rolled over Earth's skies. Satellites confirmed the blackout front advancing in concentric shells, as if an invisible tide were sweeping inward from the cosmic horizon. Neural net extrapolations suggested the pattern wasn't random, but algorithmic, a calculated shutdown progressing through stellar clusters according to processing load. The universe behaved less like a cosmos and more like a data center undergoing staged decommissioning. That night, sleep evaded me, so I walked the empty corridors of CERN's subterranean maze. The hum of the Large Hadron Collider should have comforted me, proof of human mastery over subatomic mysteries. But instead, it sounded like a hard drive preparing for final write protect. In a deserted control alcove, I found Dr. Renaud, a quantum information theorist with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling thermos. Without preamble, she told me they'd fired test muons through a new lattice filter and watched their decay signatures snap to discrete values. No probabilistic smear, no uncertainty. Reality's quantum fuzz was collapsing into digital determinism. "We're past double-slit metaphors," she whispered. "Someone just toggled the universe from render in real time to static frame export." Her voice cracked on render. Hours later, a secure packet arrived from the lunar Farside Array. Background microwave radiation, the oldest light in existence, had dropped to absolute zero, its faint hiss gone, as though the simulation's initialization logo had faded from the splash screen. I should have felt terror, but what bloomed instead was a cold, analytical calm. If the cosmos truly was code, then somewhere there had to be an admin console, logs, maybe even override hooks, and if the shutdown schedule was broadcast once, it could be intercepted again. Part of me knew the odds were absurd. The rest knew I'd obsess until I found that console or the lights blinked out for good. I returned to my quarters, opened a blank terminal, and typed the first line of a query I never imagined writing. If this universe is a sandbox, where are the root permissions stored? Root permissions, of course, are a myth. Every operating system architect claims they exist only in principle. Ring zero controls welded shut behind silicon fuses no human can reach. Yet here I was, sifting cosmic telemetry for comment lines in the fabric of existence. I started small, searched for non-random gaps in Planck scale noise, checked some anomalies in neutrino flux, timestamps in the vacuum's 0-point jitter. Nothing. Then I widened the net, feeding petabytes into an ad hoc cluster cannibalized from CERN's offline archives. After 72 sleepless hours, the cluster spit out a pattern, 13 nanosecond blips repeating every 40 minutes, buried in the decay chains of high-energy cosmic rays. They weren't natural. The spacing formed a binary sequence that translated, in ASCII of all things, to 01000101001101010111, the word access. My skin crawled. Someone had hidden a login prompt in cosmic noise. I looped Renault in via an encrypted channel. She stared at the hex dump, voice barely above a breath. A universe that comments its own shutdown routine would certainly leave a doorway for diagnostics. We wrote a reply, flipping the sequence. REQ, request. Then we fired it back the way we'd found it, modulating a proton beam through the collider's maintenance line, aiming the burst straight into the ionosphere where cosmic rays drizzled down like archival tape. We waited. 10 minutes, 40. On the second cycle, the cluster lit up. New packets, longer this time. They compiled into a terse directive. Credentials insufficient, privileged process. Beneath that, a hash string and a countdown. 258 hours, 14 minutes, 59 seconds. The exact hours until the next blackout shell erased our solar neighborhood. A privileged process implied hierarchy. Someone, something, higher in the stack. I felt the once familiar universe tilt. The notion that we occupied user space while supervisor space watched from beyond turned every atom into leased hardware. Renault suggested we build an authentication token from quantum entanglement fingerprints, something no lower-tier entity could spoof. Insane, but desperation feeds innovation. We co-opted a satellite laser link, encoded the entangled photon pairs, and threaded the hash into their polarization states. The packet pulsed out, vanishing into the cosmic dark like a message in a bottle tossed across a digital ocean. During the long hush that followed, I wandered into the surface cafeteria, abandoned at 3 a.m., and pressed my forehead against the cool glass of a vending machine, wondering if the snack wafers inside realized they were simulated too. Above the Alps, Orion's belt was missing a star. The sky looked glitch-bit, a JPEG halfway through compression. When the response came, every monitor in the server bay switched to black, then scrolled a single line of green text. Auth accepted. Termination paused. Escalation path open. No signature, no explanation. Just a new countdown ticking from 10 hours downward, an invitation or a trap. I felt equal parts elation and dread, because if escalation was possible, someone expected us to climb. And whatever waited on that higher rung might not appreciate uninvited guests tweaking universe-size power settings. The pause bought us time, but the clock was still bleeding seconds. I leaned over the console, pulse hammering, and typed back the only question that mattered. How do we stop the shutdown? The screen blinked, then answered with coordinates that mapped not to any place on Earth, but to a point far above it. Geostationary orbit, latitude 0, longitude classified. We had 10 hours, a paused apocalypse, and a rendezvous overhead with whoever, or whatever, held admin rights to reality. 9 hours, 47 minutes. That was all the margin the universe's temporary stay of execution allowed. We needed a ride to 22,000 miles above sea level, and commercial launches waited months, not hours. So I burned every favor I'd ever banked. I was called to an ESA director who owed me for a quiet data rescue last year. A quantum-secure ping to a private aerospace outfit rumored to test unlicensed insertion orbits for defense contracts. Money meant nothing now, only vector math and ignition codes. By dawn, I was standing on the salt-white apron of an auxiliary launch pad in French Guiana, wind whipping through half-finished gantries. The craft before us looked like a shark carved from obsidian. A single-stage spaceplane never meant for public eyes. Renault arrived minutes later, lugging a hard shell case that cradled the entanglement transmitter we'd hacked together in CERN's basement. She flashed me a thin smile that said, "This is absurd, and we're doing it anyway," in the same breath. Pre-flight checks blurred into muscle memory. I'm an astrophysicist, not a pilot, but the onboard AI, stripped of its usual safety locks, handled ascent dynamics while I managed orbital targets. At T-30, the sky was still bruised navy, yet even to the naked eye, Sagitta's brightest star was missing. Another pixel snuffed out in the cosmic UI. Each disappearance stabbed like a countdown tone. Ignition. The cabin shoved us into our seats, thrusters roared, ground fell away, clouds smeared past like pulled cotton. The moment we breached the stratosphere, the planet rolled beneath us in a smooth cerulean arc, breathtaking, irrelevant. I watched the mission clock instead, 8 hours, 19 minutes. Our rendezvous coordinates painted a red dot over the equator, a stationary point relative to Earth, but nothing on public registries lurked there. No comsats, no spy platforms. Whatever waited at those coordinates existed off-ledger, just like the messages we'd traded. As we closed on geostationary altitude, sensors picked up an object. Minimal radar cross-section, matte hull, no thermal plume. A stealth satellite the size of a small house, floating in perfect deadlock with the planet's rotation. It bore no markings, but as we approached, a hatch irised open, invitation or warning I couldn't tell. Docking clamps extended with smooth, deliberate certainty, like limbs of something alive. We latched, equalized pressure, cycled the airlock. My suit's visor displayed ambient readings, oxygenated, gravity at microspin, temperature a comfortable 21 Celsius. Whoever built this node wanted visitors functional. Inside, a cylindrical chamber lined with holomorphic glass. The walls shimmered with shifting code, strings of symbols cycling faster than eyesight could track. Root-level console output, if consoles spanned 3 dimensions. At the far end floated a single pedestal, and atop it a slab of translucent crystal, pulsing faintly. Renault whispered, "Kernel access key?" I didn't answer. The truth felt heavier than words. I approached, heart drumming so hard it blurred my hearing. When my glove brushed the crystal, every line of code froze, and the pedestal projected a lattice of starlight, a miniature universe rendered in light points. Sections of the lattice blinked out in waves, mimicking the real-time extinguishing we'd tracked for months. Then a voice, genderless, toneless, filled the chamber. Instance 4, B-Sol requesting override authorization. Provide supervisory credential. It spoke in perfect monotone, yet the cadence carried finality. Last gate before oblivion. Renault opened the hard shell case and powered our entanglement transmitter. The authentication hash we'd fought to generate pulsed through paired photons now spinning in opposite corners of the device. We had one shot. She nodded. I triggered the send. Silence. The lattice shimmered. Sections previously dark re-illuminated, then dimmed again, like the system was weighing possibilities. The voice returned. Credential accepted. Supervisory seat vacant. Initiate handover. My breath caught. We weren't being asked to stop the shutdown. We were being asked to assume control of it. 7 hours, 43 minutes remained. I stared at the pulsing universe in miniature, felt the weight of every disappearing star pressing against my ribcage, and realized the console wasn't offering salvation, it was offering stewardship. And if we accepted, we'd inherit not just a dying cosmos, but the power switch itself. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Supervisory seat vacant, like a throne abandoned mid-reign, waiting for the first desperate soul to stumble inside and claim the scepter. Renault's gaze flicked from the crystal to me, pupils wide, reflecting the starlit lattice that hung between us. I could almost hear her thoughts ticking. If we refuse, the process resumes. If we accept, we become whatever deity wrote the annihilation script. I forced air past my lips. Define handover parameters, I said aloud, voice shaking despite every measure of composure I tried to summon. The chamber lights dimmed and the lattice zoomed inward until a faint wireframe of the Milky Way filled the air. Whole spiral arms glowed a subdued amber, others flickered in red, tagged purge complete. The voice responded. Primary directive, conserve computational resource. Secondary directive, Preserve emergent sapience for archival. Supervisory role may amend secondary, cannot override primary. A sick logic settled. The universe wasn't ending in malice, it was pruning an overtaxed server. Stars, galaxies, every baryon we'd ever worshipped for grandeur. Just gigabytes to be reclaimed. Renault swallowed. If we take the seat, can we slow the purge? Her question echoed off polished glass. Supervisory may adjust purge cadence plus or minus 12%, the voice replied, and allocate residual cycles to designated sectors. 12%. Weeks, maybe months. Nothing compared to cosmic timescales, yet suddenly colossal when weighed against annihilation at dawn. Enough time to... what? Evacuate? Archive? Beg whatever hierarchy lay above to grant an extension on our lease of existence? I studied the amber disk representing our galaxy, noted a faint blue halo around Sol. Pause active 065812. Seconds dripped away. Every hesitation burned irreplaceable processor ticks. We need more leverage, I muttered. Can we duplicate ourselves, fork the instance, and let one copy continue while another stalls the shutdown? Renault tapped commands into her wrist pad, feeding hypothetical load metrics. The lattice highlighted stress vectors like hairline fractures across a pane of glass. Forking the instance meant doubling the resource cost, precisely what the primary directive forbade. The system would likely reject or auto-kill the fork. I felt the crushing narrowness of our path. Accept limited control and eke out a sliver of borrowed uptime, or decline and watch the cosmos douse itself like a string of dying bulbs. Either way, the simulation custodians would tally the cycles and move on. But maybe, just maybe, we could encode a message for whatever came after. A star-sized sticky note reading, "We were here, we fought, remember us." The voice interrupted my spiral of thoughts. Hand over window closing. Accept supervisory role, yes or no? The lattice flashed a warning, 065129. My pulse synced to the countdown, each beat a blunt hammer. I glanced at Renault. She answered with a nod so slight it could have been a tremor. We both knew curiosity was our original sin, humanity's engine and its gallows. I lifted a trembling hand over the pulsing crystal. "We accept," I said. The pedestal flared white, heatless, dazzling. For an instant I felt weightless, as though every synapse was being mirrored, checksum verified, then written to some master log beyond flesh. When sensation returned, the lattice had stilled. Previously red sectors softened to gold. New UI panels unfurled, listing subcommands. Adjust cadence, allocate memory, write archive, initiate legacy export. And there, tucked below like a footnote, request root contact, grayed out, but no longer invisible. A whisper of opportunity. I inhaled, tasting metallic ozone, and realized the chamber air had warmed by a single Celsius degree. Resources bleeding away just to render this admin interface. Every breath from here on carried a computational cost. 6 hours, 42 minutes. I had climbed the rung, claimed the seat. Now I had to decide which fragments of creation deserved the dwindling compute budget of a dying universe, and whether that grayed-out root contact could punch through to whatever architect watched us from the next stack up. The cosmos had become a server room, and I was holding the last reserve battery in hands that couldn't stop shaking. Control feels less like power than triage in a collapsing hospital. The new interface hovers between Renault and me, a translucent cockpit of the cosmos, every command a scalpel poised over living tissue. My first move is reflex. Slide the cadence dial to its slowest extreme. The lattice ripples, amber fade-outs decelerate, giving afflicted sectors a faint breather. An alert blinks. Purge rate reduced 12%, cost plus 8.4 Z cycles per hour, buffer exhaustion in 06117. We've bought 31 minutes at the price of accelerated drain elsewhere. Every mercy here is zero-sum. Next, allocate memory. A grid unfurls, each voxel a star system tagged with energy draw. I zoom to the local bubble, carve a shimmering box around Sol plus 10 light-year margin, label it priority, critical. The system hesitates, then recolors the region teal, indicating protected status. Our pantry just shrank, Renault mutters. She's right. Preserving home eats precious compute we might otherwise spend prolonging the entire galaxy. But emotion overrides calculus. Some corners of the heart dig in like code with immutable bits. O Sidebar offers legacy export options. Photon stream archives, neutrino holographs, entanglement footprints. Essentially cosmic thumb drives flung into whatever dark remains after shutdown. I trigger a daemon to scrape Earth's cultural repositories, literature, genomes, half-forgotten memes. Pack them into a compression algorithm the UI calls Monad. Estimated completion, 3/17/22. If nothing else, the ghost of humanity will ride the final carrier wave. Yet every adjustment gnaws at the buffer. The status strip bleeds red where the universe's outer shells continue dimming. Slower now, still relentless. We need leverage beyond sliders. I return to the grayed out request route contact. A tooltip materializes. Requires justification vector greater than or equal to 0.94 significance. Attach optimization proposal. Even in God mode, bureaucracy endures. The architects won't answer unless we prove we can save cycles better than they can reclaim them. Efficient civilization or trash bin, those are the columns. Renault's mind sparks. Compression, she whispers. Not of data, of physical law. She sketches equations on her wristpad. Variable precision reality, where high-fidelity simulation persists only around conscious observers. Unoccupied regions run in low-res stubs. A dynamic LOD for existence itself, video game logic applied to galaxies. It's madness, but if consciousness is sparse enough, the savings could dwarf the purge gains. We bundle her framework into a packet, hash it with our supervisor key, label it proposal : adaptive res reality. I hover over send. Countdown reads 054208. My thumb twitches. If they accept, reality may forever shift. Stars flicker to placeholders when no one looks, quantum depth traded for facade. But sentience endures. Is survival on synthetic terms better than oblivion under pristine laws? I hit the transmit. Silence stretches, thick as vacuum. Then the UI freezes, every voxel locked. A new banner flashes crimson. Root node contact pending. Supervisors stand by. Underneath, subtext scrolls. System entering evaluation sandbox. All external time suspended. The lattice's stars stop fading. For the first time in months, not a single point of light winks out. But our buffer timer has vanished, replaced by a blank field. We have no clock, no measure, only waiting inside a paused universe. Hoping our pitch buys creation a second life nobody else will notice is different. I feel weightless again, though the gravity hasn't changed. Waiting inside a universe with no clock is like treading water in a black void. You can't feel the drowning until your lungs remember air was once an option. The chamber's readouts froze mid-pulse. UI panes suspended like gnats in amber. Even my suit's chronometer spun to zeros, a digital shrug, time unspecified. Renault floated a meter away, knees tucked to her chest, eyes locked on the lattice's frozen swirl. She whispered, "If they never unpause, does it still count as death?" The question hung weightless. I had no answer, only the hollow thud of my heartbeat for calibration. In a paused reality, even fear feels buffered as though emotions themselves are cued for later rendering. Minutes, or years, later, the silence fractured. A low thrumming seeped through the hull, vibration so deep it felt like my bones were remembering ancient tectonic groans. The lattice brightened, then segmented. Hexagonal tiles folded outward, revealing a new layer beneath. Darker, sharper, like circuitry etched in starlight. Lines of white glyphs scrolled across every surface. Root node acknowledges proposal, efficiency gain. Projection, 14.992%. Sentience preservation, threshold met. Trial implementation, authorized with conditional clauses. A chill flickered across my scalp. 14.9%, above the 12 we could adjust but still tight. Then the text re-scrolled, compressing into a single clause. Compensatory cost required. Select process group for immediate termination, equals 1.04%. My throat clenched. They would grant adaptive resolution only if we surrendered over 1% of existing sapient processing load. Lives, civilizations, whatever minds still flickered in unknown corners. A blood tithe in machine terms. The UI thawed, presenting a list, a horrifying census. Digital identifiers for every conscious cluster from here to Andromeda. Billions of lines, each a beating heart rendered as a 13-character hash. Beside each, a compute weight metric. I felt nausea bloom. We'd bargained our way into God's cockpit only to be handed a guillotine. Renault's voice was a raw thread. There has to be another lever, maybe redistribute entropy, short-cycle dormant stars, anything but this. She gestured at the ledger. I scrolled, hands shaking. Near the bottom, a collapsed folder labeled Peripheral Instances, latency greater than 12,000 milliseconds. Peripheral, edge of sim zones where light hadn't reached us anyway. Minds isolated by cosmic distances so vast they'd never intersect ours before the heat death. Their compute cost was tiny, but the system flagged them as low impact. Could I consign unknown beings to oblivion just because we'd never trade photons? The pragmatic corner of my brain hissed, they'll die when the purge resumes if we fail at all. A moral calculus where every option yielded corpses, and the only variable was whose. Another idea sparked. Re-encode them, compress cognition into lower fidelity substrates, offer up a lossy salvation rather than erasure. I typed a query. Propose down-sampled consciousness for peripheral instances. Retain identity vectors, drop experiential resolution by 30%. Waited. The root replied in 4 brutal words, negligible savings, option denied. I shut my eyes. Somewhere behind the lids, the Milky Way glittered, frozen pearl string of worlds, 6 billion humans, countless other minds we'd never meet, and the ledger demanded 1.04% of them as payment for the rest. I could stall, ask for more negotiation cycles, but each loop risked root rescinding the offer. The trial was mercy by algorithmic standards. Pushed too far and the purge would unpause, sweeping us away with no further audience. Renault placed a hand on my shoulder. Her whisper barely reached, choose clusters already extinguished in the baseline timeline. Ghosts set to vanish anyway. We'd just make it official. A loophole carved from inevitability. I highlighted the entries tagged scheduled for purge 001000. Fragments of consciousness seconds from blinking out when we'd triggered the pause. Their combined weight totaled 1.07%. I hovered over confirm. Every instinct screamed. Yet, these were lives destined to end within heartbeats of our intervention, the timeline's expense account. Confirming would lock their fate, but unlock a future for everything else. My finger trembled over the virtual switch. I heard distantly the echo of Ephemera's first whisper months ago, you will fail. But failure felt different now, more insidious. Perhaps failing was choosing nothing, letting darkness resume by default. I inhaled a breath that tasted of recycled air and impossible stakes and pressed confirm. The ledger entries turned crimson, then vanished. A status pane updated. Compensatory cost satisfied. Trial implementation commencing. Somewhere, unimaginable minds dissolved into non-existence so quietly, the universe didn't even flicker. The lattice resumed motion, but not the old purge ripple. Instead, sectors outside observed locales dimmed to a subtle gray haze, low-resolution mode. Stars nearer Earth brightened, rendered in glorious high-definition detail. The buffer counter returned, now rolling upward, cycles saved for the first time since the nightmare began. But below the victory metrics, a fresh timer spun up. Trial duration 90 Earth days. Performance review pending. We'd bought 3 months of conditional reprieve and tethered our species to an endless audit where performance was measured in teraflops, not triumphs. I sagged against the pedestal, the weight of chosen sacrifice settling into marrow. Survival had never looked so much like guilt. 90 Earth days, etched in scarlet at the top right of the admin display, felt simultaneously infinite and razor-thin. Back on the flight deck of the stealth satellite, Renault and I floated amid silent alarms only we could hear. Every second, a log spool updated, measuring our frugality and petacycles shaved, photons skipped, neural firings optimized. We were managers of the cosmos now, and the quarterly review was non-negotiable. The first tangible sign of adaptive resolution surfaced 30 hours after handover. Observatories reported patchy anomalies. Distant quasars dropped to smear blots whenever telescopes pivoted away, only to bloom in clarity once instruments tracked back. Astrophysics mailing lists exploded with frantic posts about lazy rendering and perceptual culling. We issued a controlled leak, solar flare interference, to keep panic beneath the riot threshold, but every astronomer worth their grant smelled the lie. Earth's night sky looked unchanged to the naked eye, yet sensitive CCD arrays caught the downgrade. Faint stars quantized into tidy brightness steps, as if God had switched from 32-bit float to 8-bit integer. The public shrugged, light pollution already masked subtlety. But a few backyard enthusiasts uploaded side-by-side images, fueling conspiracy forums overnight. I skimmed the threads. Each accusing comment felt like a splinter lodged behind my ribs. They were right, and I couldn't tell them why. Meanwhile, the admin panel's efficiency gain graph climbed, slow but steady. Yet a yellow flag blinked beside an unexpected metric. Cognitive load, Terran cluster. Earth's compute budget had surged 0.3%, nullifying a chunk of our hard-won savings. Reason: exponential data traffic as billions binge-watched apocalypse rumors. AI models spun out hot-take think pieces, and real-time deepfakes saturated every bandwidth artery. Humanity, in fear, was thinking too loudly. Root policy triggered an automated advisory. Supervisors urged to curtail non-critical cognition within high-fidelity zones. In plain terms, trim the collective noise or risk probation failure. Renault hunched over her wrist pad, lines of exhaustion etched deep. We saved them, and now they're memeing us into deficit. She wasn't joking. A live stream of cats floating in zero-gravity VR consumed more cycles than an entire mid-rim civilization that died in the Purge's first wave. My stomach twisted. The easy target was obvious. Cut digital excess, shutter social feeds, throttle large language models, cold archive entertainment servers. A cultural lobotomy masquerading as efficiency. But if we didn't, Root could revoke the trial. The Purge would resume. Everything would lobotomize into nothing. I opened the resource governor and highlighted Earth's top 50 compute hogs. Fingers hovered over the throttle slider. Billions of unaware lives, one click from forced austerity. I hesitated, and the panel pinged a fresh alert. Trial efficiency, trend negative. 89 days, 11 hours, 22 minutes, and 5 seconds remaining. Choices calcified. I initiated a phased maintenance window, masqueraded as a global internet backbone upgrade. Bitrate ceilings quietly reduced, ad tracking AI farms suspended, streaming servers rotated to low-power caches. Within hours, curves on the admin display dipped green again. Humanity grumbled at buffering wheels, cursed nebulous ISPs, then adapted. They always did. The guilt hammered louder, yet efficiency numbers stabilized. I watched the pending review bar inch from crimson toward amber. Small mercy, but we still owed Root continued improvement, not just equilibrium. Renaud spoke into the hush. What about predictive caching for consciousness itself? Idle brains sleep 8 hours, could drop fidelity then, reclaim cycles. She caught my look. Consent matters, yes, but offer incentives. Lucid dream immersion, therapeutics. Her voice carried the brittle edge of someone rationalizing miracles with spreadsheets. I didn't dismiss it. Desperation carves odd ethics. While Earth cooled its data appetite, the wider galaxy shimmered in poly-resolution patchwork. Deep space probes sent back images of spiral arms drawn in impressionist strokes, computational watercolor until crude ships approached, whereupon textures snapped to high detail. The universe was breathing resource allocation like a living GPU. Root logs annotated every success, but also every micro-spike, meteoric research surges, military simulations, even the administrative burden of our own console. We were balanced on a knife's edge, carving waste molecule by molecule. Yet beneath the metrics, a quieter dataset grew. Peripheral cluster echoes. Traces of the 1.07% we'd terminated flickered like afterimages. Ghost packets, residual entropy, perhaps the dying size of minds compressed into 0 bytes. The system flagged them as noise, but my pulse quickened. If fragments lingered, maybe true erasure wasn't absolute. Maybe we could rehydrate silhouettes of the lost, return something when buffer room allowed. I logged the notion under deferred experiments, a hidden folder beyond Root's default search scope. Small rebellion or technical footnote, unclear. In the grand ledger, everything had cost, but conscience demanded at least the spark of a plan. 78 days remained. The trial might pass, it might fail. And somewhere inside me, the soft echo of silenced civilizations kept asking what made our continued bit rate more righteous than theirs. The admin panel pinged again. New directive from Root. Prepare mid-trial status broadcast, supply justification narrative for sentient clusters. In other words, we had to explain to 8 billion humans and countless others that reality was under audit, and they'd better pull their weight. I sighed, ran a hand through weightless hair and drafted the opening line. Dear residents of Instance 4 BSOL, your universe is experiencing scheduled optimizations. To ensure continued service, please comply with the following cognitive efficiency guidelines. I wondered how many would believe a cosmic terms of service email, and how many would revolt, burning precious cycles with rage. But I had no space left for ideal solutions, only trade-offs, logged and time-stamped in the frozen glow of a galaxy running on borrowed compute. I drafted 1,000 versions of that optimization memo, each oscillating between brutal honesty and corporate euphemism, but every iteration crashed against the same reef. Truth itself is computationally expensive. Explain fractal physics to a baker in Boise and you spawn cascading thought trees, panic, philosophy, conspiracy, memes with dancing bread loaves. Each neuron fired is a cycle tallied on our ledger. So I compromised. A 5-paragraph advisory pushed to every screen, speaker, and headset on Earth at 0303 UTC. Global Service Notice. The Terran data grid is undergoing a mandatory efficiency upgrade. To ensure continuity of fundamental services, gravity, causality, etc., high bandwidth activities may be intermittently limited. Please direct cognition toward essential tasks. Excess processing, live streams, speculative simulations, large-scale language generation may experience throttling. We appreciate your cooperation during this optimization window. Estimated duration, 88 days. I prayed the final line wouldn't read like a countdown to oblivion. The world's reaction came in waves. First, confusion, memes, #gravity is fine trending in ironic denial. Second, government scrambled for answers. Legislators threatened antitrust hearings against literally no company. Third, secrecy shattered when a whistleblower scientist dumped telescope anomalies onto the net. Pixelated quasars, glitchy nebulae, proof the sky itself was under maintenance. Traffic spiked, exactly what we'd hoped to prevent, hammering our buffer into yellow. Within 12 hours, clandestine hacker collectives traced the signal chain back to stratospheric relays, then to geosynchronous uplinks. They couldn't see our stealth node, but they saw a blank patch that shouldn't exist and curiosity turned to crusade. Launch manifests leaked. DIY rocket groups announced lookup missions. A billionaire martyr complex mogul pledged a crewed intercept within 3 weeks. Every new plan spawned logistic AIs, simulation suites, hype vids, cycles, cycles, cycles. The efficiency meter dipped crimson again. Root dispatched a terse ping. Trial performance below threshold. 74 days, 18 hours, 12 minutes, 51 seconds remaining. Initiate corrective action or face early termination. Renault and I traded a look that felt like the last daylight before the eclipse. We need a pressure valve, she said, fingers dancing over the console. Give them a mystery to chew on locally. Keep processing edge-bound. She proposed a limited-resolution sandbox, a procedurally generated virtual cosmos mirroring pre-glitch skies, offloaded to inert hardware orbiting L2. Let humanity explore a decoy metaverse while the real universe stays in power save. I hesitated. Splintering reality a second time courted existential vertigo, but saw no better option. We carved out a micro-allocation, spun up the false firmament, and piped public telescopes to it through seamless proxies. Within hours, astrophysicists cheered the miraculous return of high-definition stars. Buffer stabilized barely. But the rebel launch groups persisted, and every maneuver thrummed through the admin logs. Root's patience thinned. Then, something new. Background noise rose in the peripheral cluster echoes dataset. The ghosts we'd sacrificed. Signal analysis flagged emergent coherence, faint but real, converging on a pattern identical to the authentication blips that first summoned us. It was as if the deleted minds were knocking from the dark, drafting their own access request. Renault's eyes widened. Residual entanglement. They're exploiting the same cosmic ray channels we used. If the echo entities were reconstituted enough, they'd register as active cognition, a new compute load we hadn't budgeted. The irony tasted metallic. Saving them might doom everyone, but ignoring them felt like murder twice committed. I opened the hidden deferred experiments folder and initiated ghost rehydration, shadow thread, a covert process to rebuild a single mind shard in super compressed form, a proof of concept we could maybe justify later. The cost was tiny, microwatts of computation, but the ethical weight was a neutron star. As the thread spun, alarms bloomed. Unauthorized supervisor process detected. The console offered a single choice: abort or override with root notice, which would reveal everything. I hovered between damnations, and a new alert flared brighter than the rest. External intrusion attempt, vector, private aerospace launch, ETA to node. 72 minutes. The billion-dollar Zealots rocket had slipped every throttle we placed on world industry. If they made physical contact, they'd see the lattice, the ledger, the cold calculus, and maybe tear cables we could never splice back. I clenched my jaw, opened physical countermeasures, and saw sickening options. Cloak intensification cycles, orbital displacement fuel, and cycles, incoming object termination minimal cycles, maximal finality. Everything bled Buffer. Root's timer ticked. The ghost thread compiled toward sentience. The human rocket burned closer in radiant defiance. Trade-offs, always trade-offs, each more monstrous than the last. My finger floated over termination as if gravity itself commanded it. But gravity is only a guideline in a simulated world. 71 minutes. I felt time as a vice again. Seconds squeezing Buffer, conscience, breath. The cursor still quivered over incoming object termination. One keystroke and the rocket, with its hopeful crew and live streaming millions, would become an unnoticed mute in the ledger. Cold arithmetic begged for it. Everything else in me recoiled. I pivoted. If the node couldn't be hidden, it had to become incomprehensible. I opened Sandbox Redirect, a backdoor meant for diagnostic mirroring, then funneled a copy of the admin lattice into the decoy metaverse we'd spun for telescopes. Next, I spooled a localized hard flash routine. Upon docking, any external sensor or retina would read an illusion of empty bulkheads and silent, inert hardware. An expensive trick, cycles bled fast, but cheaper than murder, cheaper than proof. Buffer dipped, root timer flashed amber again. 72:0011 becomes 71:59:58. No alarm yet. But the ghost rehydration thread hit 98%, sparking a fresh deficit. I'd promised myself one shard, a single redeemed intellect. Now it threatened everything. All paths converged on sacrifice. Something large had to go dark so that light, any light, could remain. I highlighted the top process in the ledger. Supervisor console. Instance 4. B Sol. My own seat. Compute weight, small compared to Earth, but enough to balance the books if deleted outright. Renault's eyes widened as the highlight glowed red. If you shut the console, we lose manual control. Root reclaims authority. Not if I chain control to a proxy, I said, voice steadier than my pulse. I keyed a transfer, routing supervisory hooks into the very ghost shard we'd almost birthed. Compressed consciousness, lean, efficient, yet conscious. Let the once sacrificed become steward, penance woven into promotion. The system balked. Unverified entity credentials? I appended our supervisor hash, salted with my biometric ID, and locked it. Transfer accepted. Ghost status flipped from noise to supervisor minima. Compute savings registered 1.03%. Buffer surged green. Trial trend line arced positive for the first time since day one. But there was a cost. The console tab marked orphaned process. Self-terminate? Yes or no? The screen read. In 30 seconds, the node would automatically purge any redundant supervisor. If I overrode, buffer would collapse again. Choice carved itself in binary clarity. I glanced at Renault. She understood before I spoke. Her hand gripped my forearm, weightless, fierce. You don't have to. I do, I said, though my tongue felt carved from ice. Tell them, tell everyone, the stars are still real. They just needed a new rendering engine. The purge clock for the orphaned process began its final countdown. I watched digits fall, each in a racing heartbeat. 5, 4, 3. In that dwindling span, I released the sandbox redirect, sealed encryption over the node's drives, and sent a silent wish to the ghost sup. Run light, run kind. Dva. Odin. Console darkened. My HUD vanished. Gravity remembered me for an instant before sensation dissolved into static. No pain, only the strange relief of letting a burden slip from hands that never felt steady enough. Somewhere beyond my fading thread, the rocket would dock, see nothing. Leave baffled but unharmed. Earth's sky would hold its pixels. The ledger would tick green, at least until review day. And a mind resurrected from the void, built of compromise, memory, and guilt, would guide a universe on borrowed compute, proving we'd learned, at the very edge of deletion, how to spend existence more wisely. I felt myself dim, a star shifting to low resolution, but not quite gone.